Hi, everyone. This is day 2 and also chapter 1 of reading Poor Charlie's Almanack, the expanded edition. I think it's easier to hopefully build a habit around doing something that you absolutely adore. And I absolutely adore reading and hopefully getting people excited about either reading, thinking about issues at a more macro level. I think that's a really cool way to discover patterns and to leverage strengths in different areas of life. So, on that note, let's get some learning in. This starts with a portrait of Charles T. Munger. I really love the affirmation that reading changes lives, macro level, but also just the simplicity that giving a book is giving someone a gift that can have incredibly outlandish gains. In this case, a little short story of Charlie's formal, or in this case, informal education was that his parents gave him and his siblings books for Christmas. And that was initially what got him really interested in Benjamin Franklin and just in biographies as general. I really like biographies. I think I spent a lot of my childhood reading biographies about our different presidents because that was a series and it has them in numerical order. I don't think I really understood maybe the impacts of political decisions at the time. We're talking maybe 11, 12 years old. But it really fascinated me that as everyone goes through hardships in their lives, some individuals are much more public with not only their wins, but also their mistakes and how that influenced their perception of the world, but also how that came to be in the decisions that they made, not only for their lives, but for others. Another story that I think is really cool is that Charlie Munger was exposed to a doctor in his medical library, and that really sparked an interest in him in biology. I love these type of stories where you think someone is limited to a certain maybe genre or basically a specific character point of view that a businessman needs to love and breathe business not only in their work but in their inspirational influences. But when I hear stories about people who had so many diverse interests that influence their thinking, it just not only gives me some justifications to be more interested in more than one thing, but it also reminds me that the world is bigger than what we remember and that there's so much to learn. And everything becomes so interesting the more you pay attention. Hmm. I think this is really interesting that Charlie Munger was very interested in probably problem solving, which that's not the interesting part, but broken down into equations, specifically physics equations. And I do think that the more that the world has come across decisions made by emotions and beliefs, it's important to also balance that with the understanding that the world, the universe moves in specific relations to each other's, which can be captured through mathematical equations. And that's a really beautiful reminder that science, math, that logic has a foundation in this world. Hmm. So, Charlie Munger had 8 children. Given those responsibilities, he decided that his background in law, where it was based on hours as a measurement of wealth and productivity, was not enough. And so that's when he looked at other avenues to build wealth and began investing in stocks and eventually acquired some equity in a business that he was able to give legal advice. And it's interesting to see where that turning point is, or that thought process that an hourly wage is not enough, and how to find that value you could bring to be able to translate in some form of ownership. It also did talk about one of his successful, only successful marriage to Nancy. And as a girl, I really do like this quote. It says, I think when you're buying jewelry for the woman you love, financial considerations probably shouldn't enter into it. Maybe not words to live by for everyone, but definitely thought process to think of. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger met at a dinner party as a setup for friends. So that does go to say that sometimes our friends know us really well and can be the avenue to increasing our social networks in a really positive and, in this case, very profitable way. I think it's really important to really look at, when you're looking and reading at a biography, what people say for successful partnerships over a really long period, because conflict is really difficult to have, and it's really hard to change who people are. Character is what it is, and it is what it is not. So it's interesting to me that Warren said that Charlie Munger obviously really admired Benjamin Franklin and tried to emulate a lot of his virtues. But also, he said he's never second guessed anything I've done. And I'm not sure what to think about that. Does that mean that there was blanket approval? One person had more equity or more control? Or is that just implicitly, hey, I trust you, you did your research, and what happens will happen, and we'll get to that together? That is definitely the most positive sounding explanation, and we'll see if that concept pops up again later. Ah, Susie Buffett. They both had immense respect for each other and thought that they were the smartest person that one another had ever met. And that kind of goes to the trend that if you really respect and, in other words, really value what someone brings to the table in terms of their virtue characteristics, then I think that you could have trust that their actions will be an extent of the traits that you really believe in. I didn't know this. So when they got into business together, Buffett and Munger, it was a handshake backed by Midwestern values. Really beautiful thought process. And Charlie Munger's name still is on the door of the law firm that he founded, even though he only worked there for 3 years. Wow. Mm. Forbes 400, October 11, 2004. Munger's other investments, substantial stakes in Costco, Daily Journal, and Price Legacy. All different industries that he did know a lot about. So goes to show to stay in your sphere of influence. So I always get a little bit confused into the financial structure of Berkshire Hathaway. So individually, they both used to manage funds directly for investors, but then they resolved to build equity through stock ownership in a holding company. So they own most of the stock in order to gain wealth, and they created their holding company. Okay, we'll see, we'll see if I understand it a little bit more in a bit. Hmm. Charlie Munger on being a partner. I think this quote is very interesting, so I'm going to read it to you. A partner, ideally, is capable of working alone. You can be a dominant partner, subordinate partner, or an always collaborative equal partner. I've done all three. And so he explains it that you can be subordinate or have less than someone else that you're following. I think if you believe that you could learn something from that individual, because maybe by following the right person, you would get more than working alone. And maybe the fact that they had so many long talks over the phone, it says they wrote each other letters really discussing business, their investment thought process, and strategy. And maybe the partnership is so great because alone they were already brilliant and brought could have done and did do well on their own, but together by having someone increase or make them think about their brilliance, they had even more to give and to bring to the table. Ooh, I think that's actually really interesting that obviously Benjamin Franklin came up a lot in his speeches, but his concept of making friends with dead people who were the top of their field. I think that there is a lot to learn, even if people are from different time periods, because the foundations, I think, of anything come up and finds yourself in whatever we're trying to learn to discover the history. And usually, if someone created the foundation, they have a good idea of the trend of where things are going. And also, by looking at someone's beginning and end of life, you could kind of learn from either their mistakes cheesily or also what was the outcome of their different decisions based on what they knew at that time. So Charlie Munger donated a lot to the Huntington Library, which is in San Marino, California. Interesting enough. So Charlie Munger helped with the design of the exterior. So it does kind of give me White House vibes based on the pillars, which is so cool. But I guess in that case, the White House is derived from neoclassical vibes, which is oh, back in Greek Roman times, is what I like to think of. But interestingly enough, the Munger Research Center of the Huntington Library receives all net proceeds from the sale of this book. So definitely helping keep a state-of-the-art institution, which is dedicated to research for scholars and preserving a bit of history. And I couldn't think of a better way to make use of a good book. So we're going to end here because I need to get ready. And for my first, we'll see if it's only makeup lesson. I've never had one before, and I really wanted to get an idea of maybe appreciate my own existing features and what they could look like with the tools of modern beauty. But also, it's just been a topic of interest that I've always been interested in and have never learned. So I found someone that I really, really like and am excited to learn more today. So, on that note, everyone have a really great night and take care. Bye.